I can't call and I want to thank Ceachtain O'Brien for bringing this. And actually, it was said earlier on that one of the TDs, they can't recall when the minister sat through a full debate. I actually can't recall when the government came in here and used their time to deal with the housing crisis, which would be very helpful to us to tell us how they're tackling the housing crisis, Minister. And you've sat opposite me now, I don't know, since I'm saying practically the same thing over and over. And so just let me look. Many reports are published, but I like the Simon community because this is their 31st snapshot in time over 3 days. I declare an interest. Many years ago, I worked with them as a volunteer, and they've produced 31 reports. And those 31 reports give us a snapshot of your government policy. And what does it tell us, their latest one? Their latest one tells us that a further decrease in the number of properties available to rent in the private rental market and available through a HAP since June 23, and they've been tracking it every quarter. The report comes in the context of a private rental market affected by a contraction of supply, increase in rental prices, and an overall lack of affordability. And then if I look at Galway City, which I'm constantly saying that the crisis there is equal, if not worse, than Dublin City. There was an average of 7 properties available to rent on each of the 3 days surveyed. During the study, no properties were found to be affordable under the standard HAP rates. This is Galway City Suburbs, Minister. None found. There was 1-bedroom property available for $934 a month, 1-bedroom property. The rents ranged between $1,325, $2,600 for a 2-bedroom property. That's an obscenity. Don't you agree? It's an obscenity to have a rent of $2,600 for a 2-bedroom property in Galway City Suburbs. For the 3-bedroom, they ranged up to $2,600 and so on. I mean, just obscene figures. And then if we look at Galway City Centre, Galway City Centre, 13 properties available to rent. There was 1 affordable property under the standard HAP rate for any of the 4 households examined. There were no properties available under the discretionary. Rents range from $1,000 to $1,900 for a 2-bedroom property. Can you imagine? $2,040 to $3,000 for a 2-bedroom property, and up to $3,000 for a 3-bedroom, and so on. And what does the government say every time that we stand up here and we use our own time, or we use the bigger opposition party's time, Sinn Féin, to bring this home to you, to say, Jesus, please, you've commodified the market. You've commodified the housing market. You have sold it completely to the market, and they've utterly failed. So we've brought in scheme after scheme, like a jigsaw, with no overall picture of where we're going as a society in terms of ensuring that the most basic unit in a democracy is that we have security of tenure and shelter. And we look at Galway City, and the latest headlines in the Land Development Agency is that they're about to do a deal with the port, the harbour company, which owns the land in trust for the people of Galway, public land, and they're doing a deal with the Land Development Agency. And you know what the heading was, Minister? They're going to build premium housing on the 6 acres in question. The 6 acres of public land owned in trust by a harbour company, doing a deal with a Land Development Agency to keep the prices high. Why? Because that port needs to finance the development of its, when eventually, if it does get permission, it has to be self-financing. So it's going to sell the land at a high value so they can build premium housing in a city where people are waiting up to 17, 18 and 19 years to get off the waiting list. In relation to the absence of a master plan for Galway, I've pointed it out so often I despair. Kent Station, 14 acres in the middle of town, doing its own thing. The Docks, doing its own thing. Sandy Road, doing its own thing. Headford Road, doing its own thing. No city architect. An absence of planners in the city and the county. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about planning legislation and blaming the objector, labelling the person who's doing his best or her best to bring their concerns to our attention. We demonise them, we other them, and we put them out. And in the meantime, we're back to developer-led development. And you know what's horrible about that? We've twisted language completely. Up to recently, we were able to say developer-led development. Now we're being told in the new Planning Act, oh no, that's all changed. its public participation, while at the same time we're utterly reducing public participation. And I have stood up here and I have agreed with the Green Party on issues, and I will continue to do so. But it's shocking what you're doing in relation to the planning legislation. In relation to the Galway Task Force, it was set up, the Housing Task Force, 2019, because the system had failed to build houses in Galway from the time of the financial crisis. Not a single public house was built from 2009 up to 2020. And we wonder why there's a crisis. And we set up a task force and they haven't even reported. They haven't reported except page reports on an annual basis, but absolutely no comprehensive report on an analysis of the housing crisis in Galway and solutions. Thank you, Ken Gordon.